Pregnancy is a natural process. So if it's not happening or if it's not sticking, something is missing. After having a family member go through infertility and experiencing a miscarriage myself, I realized how little support and education women have around infertility. I want to change that. I'm Dr. Jane Levesque. I'm a naturopathic doctor and a natural fertility expert. Tune in every Tuesday at 9 a.m. for insightful case studies, expert interviews, and practical tips on how you can optimize fertility naturally. If you've been struggling with infertility, pregnancy loss, women's health issues, or you just want to be proactive and prepare yourself for the next big chapter in your life, this show is for you. Today, I have the pleasure of connecting with Heather Gray. She's a functional diagnostic nutritionist and a bioenergetic practitioner. I met her at ECO, Exponential Clinical Outcomes, an event that hosted by Cellcore, and she specializes in supporting clients with chronic and complex illnesses, such as Lyme disease, mold toxicity, and autoimmune disease. She is a ball of energy, and her story is incredible. I hope you guys enjoy. Hi, Heather. Thanks so much for being here. It was such a pleasure to meet you at ECO, and I'm glad that we got to connect and now be on the podcast together.
Absolutely. I just can't thank you enough. I'm just so excited to be here.
Of course. Thanks. Tell us tell us a little bit about your story and how you end up specializing in something like chronic illness, autoimmunity, mold toxicity, Lyme. What brought you here?
I like to start at the beginning and telling people that I was basically born full of shit, right? Like how many of your clients and patients can relate to being really constipated as a kid, right? And that was the start of my, let's throw Band-Aids at symptoms, let's throw
Totally.
oils and laxatives and stool softeners down in this 4-year-old's throat instead of trying to figure out why she's constipated, right?
Yep.
Hindsight's 2020. That was the same year my uncle committed suicide. My grandmother died of breast cancer, and I was being raised by alcoholic addicts. So to say that there was a lot of trauma and chaos.
Oh my God. Yeah. Right? Just to unpack all that. It's like, holy crap.
I was like, the only thing I got from my mom was a high A score,
Yeah.
If people don't know, adverse childhood events, and they're now showing a correlation between the higher the number and your correlation of getting autoimmune and being more susceptible to these chronic illnesses as an adult. So yeah, it's like the one thing, if I can get anybody to pay attention to, so many folks are like, disease, cause, disease, treat. And it usually doesn't work that way. There's usually some process in motion for years that
decades.
that are making you more susceptible to these things. So this is why I start where I start.
Yep.
And then, so I think that kicked on my celiac gene right around that time. I was eating a standard American diet, the SAD diet, so through all that, by the time I became a teenager, I was the perfect host for Lyme disease. So when I got bit by a tick when I was 13, didn't show up symptoms till 2 years later when I ended up in the psych ward the first time for my first suicide attempt. First out of many, unfortunately. Most people don't realize that a lot of folks with Lyme don't die from Lyme. They usually die from suicide because their brain's so inflamed and nobody believes them, and they've been gaslit their whole life. So there's not a whole lot of hope there. So fast forward quite a few more years. I mean, I went 27 years undiagnosed. I mean,
that's incredible. Like just what you already told me, I'm getting goosebumps of just like, my God, this poor 13, 14, 15-year-old girl not getting any help. And you're right. Like nobody believes you. Your brain is so inflamed. Like you can't help but have intrusive thoughts because that's like, how else are you you don't even know what it's like not to have those. Wow.
I want to start a movement. I want to stop calling people crazy because the minute you have that crazy on someone, right, they can't wash that off and it sticks with them. Instead, I want to say your brain inflammation is showing, right? Because that's really what's
your
happening.
brain. Yeah. I've been thinking about that all the time because I have small kids. So now I look at their friends and I'm just like, their friends don't have ADHD or they don't have behavioral issues or whatever. It's like their brain is inflamed. And you can almost see it in their eyes, right? So.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. So your brain inflammation is showing. So like pass it on. Let's start a movement because it's really, really hard to overcome that stigma once you've been labeled crazy. So yeah, I mean, all these things. So 27 years undiagnosed, multiple suicide attempts, like all the symptoms and signs of Lyme. My gut was trashed. My brain was trashed, leaky gut, leaky brain, whole 9 yards. I think I was probably on the edge again. And one of my friends was trying to talk me down and she sent me to a new doctor. She was actually a physician's assistant in Denver. And I don't remember where she was from, but she had the coolest accent. But I get there and she gets a twinkle in her eye. And within 5 minutes, she goes, I know what's wrong with you. And I'm thinking, bullshit, crazy lady. And she goes,
Yeah, it's been 27 years.
okay, 5 minutes I've been here.
Yeah.
And she goes, have you ever been bit by a tick? I was like, yeah, when I was 13. Why? And she goes, I'm pretty sure you have Lyme disease. And I was like, huh, okay. So I'm driving home, tears streaming down my face, and I scream, I told you I'm not crazy, right? That's the title of my book when I finally write it, is I told you I'm not crazy, the realities of Lyme disease. And so I thought, here I've got my golden ticket, only to find out later that, the next chapter was almost going to be even harder, because the CDC
Sure.
just recognized last year that the disease that I've had for 27 years is legit. So the way insurance and doctors and everybody treats it, it's really controversial. You can't get a lot of the help that you need. And so it's another battle, right? So it's another battle. And Lyme usually doesn't come by itself. It usually comes with co-infections and viruses. And then by the time it was all said and done, I had 3 autoimmune diseases, and I was like 150 pounds overweight, and,
Yeah.
so many things that I had
Well,
to.
an interesting thing you said, the interesting thing you said is that something set you up for Lyme as well. Right. So it's like, the Lyme was the thing. Can you elaborate on that? Because it's like, it was the constipation and the microbiome and the terrain. And then when you got bit by a tick, it was almost like that was the last straw.
Yeah,
Did I
absolutely.
understand that
Oh,
correctly? Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah, because so many folks think, oh, I was bit by a tick and I got sick. And I'm trying to tell them, I'm like, if that's the way that it worked, everybody would have Lyme disease, because it's not just a tick that spreads it. It's mosquitoes, it's bed bugs, it's fleas, it's sexually transmitted, it's transmitted congenitally. So if that was the case, everybody who got bit by a tick would have it. And that's not the case. It's your genetics, it's your detox genes, it's your environment, it's epigenetics, it's all these things setting you up, like I said, to be a perfect host. And with my early childhood trauma, my trashed gut, I was living in mold at the time, right? My nervous system was shot. I was eating horribly. So yeah, I was the perfect host.
Yeah.
Type A personality.
I just think like it's really important to outline that, because sometimes we just fixate on this one thing that happened at whatever age, where in reality, there was even the events that happened before that set you up for that. I didn't mean to interrupt, but it was just,
No,
I'm
absolutely.
like,
No,
oh my
I
God.
said that, they said that at the beginning. If this is the one point that I can get across, that it's not as black and white as cause and effect, that there's
Yeah.
usually something downstream that's been happening for years, decades,
Yeah.
before we start showing symptoms.
Yeah. So tell us that, the journey, insurance, healing, figuring out.
So that was a nightmare. And I did the Western Med model for about 5 months, and I thought I was going to die, because never
Mm,
once did they ask me if I was pooping, and I wasn't, right? Still wasn't, for
mm.
34 years. I wasn't sleeping well. No one asked me about my diet. No one asked me about my stress level. Instead, they went to war, right, with a body that had been sick for decades, and I thought I was going to die. And intuitively, something in me told me that this isn't going to work. I had a 9-year-old. I was a hairstylist. I didn't have a medical background, but I just knew I had to look a different way. And then I heard the founder of FDN, Reed Davis, speaking on a podcast, right? Sean Croxton, Underground Wellness. And he was like, you got to make sure that your gut is healed and that your hormones are balanced and that your detox pathways are open. And like intuitively, I was like, holy shit, this makes sense, right?
Totally. Yeah.
At the time, the course was only $1,500. This was back in 2013. I think it's up to $8,000 now, and it's still totally worth it. Completely saved my life, because when you go through it, you have to do a couple functional labs on yourself to be your own guinea pig, and found out I had blastocystis hominis, and that my liver was congested, and then I started looking into funky detox genes. People talk about having a detox bucket. I have a detox thimble, right? So it doesn't take much to overfill and get me sick and inflamed. So I have to lead a very healthy, damn near perfect lifestyle. That is just my path. And it sucks sometimes. I'll find myself getting into a little bit of a pity party. And then I snap out of it, because for the most part, I don't know anybody else who has had all the things that I've had wrong with them now functioning at a level that I do. So
Yeah.
I take a handful of pills every day. And I have another saying that, my self-care feels like a part-time job, but it's better than being full-time sick, right? So
Yes.
these
Yeah.
lifestyle things that I've put into place, and it wasn't the latest and greatest treatment, right? I didn't spend tens of thousands of dollars on some cutting edge technology. It was, a lot of it was getting back to the basics, getting back to the foundations.
Yeah. Well, and you were just talking, you came back from a Dave Asprey conference where we are getting into some pretty cool biohacks. And yeah, they're not available to everyone like the costs of them could be anywhere between $10,000 to hundreds of thousands of dollars, but it's we're getting there. Eventually, hopefully there'll be a little bit more available for us.
Absolutely. And the tools are great for people who have put down the foundations and who are starting
Totally.
wanting to tweak it a little bit faster, a little bit more, or longevity stuff. But that's what a lot of people want to just jump straight to those toys. And I'm like, no, no, don't pass go. Don't collect $200. Like, you've got to lay those foundations down first.
Yeah. Otherwise, you're not really going to feel it.
No,
So,
no.
and you said you have a 9-year-old. How was your fertility, pregnancy? Is there anything remarkable to share or anything memorable to share? Because
I
my
missed
audience,
the first time. About 7 months before I got pregnant with him, I miscarried. And hindsight's 2020 again. So I had cavitations from wisdom teeth removal when I was 15. And when they opened that up and sent everything back to pathology, there was some pretty nasty viruses, parasites, bacteria in there. One of them that actually leads to higher rates of miscarriages, right? On top of the Lyme and the mold and the heavy metals as well, also lead to higher infertility and miscarriages. So the fact that I had him was kind of a miracle. It's another hindsight 2020. Dr. Todd Watts was talking at Echo about atrazine and how it's changing the fertility of these amphibians. And guess what? My son is transgendered. And I can't help but wonder if I would have had this information 10 years ago and I would have detoxed him first for at least a year before allowing him to transition, how different our lives may be right now. Because when I was pregnant with him, I was undiagnosed, Lyme disease, mold toxicity, cavitations, heavy metals, parasites, leaky gut, malnourished. How do you create a healthy baby from nothing, from that deficit? You don't. You
yeah.
don't. He was diagnosed with celiac at the age of 2. His little belly had been so distended for so long, the muscles actually separated like a pregnant person's. He had lost
Oh,
like 10
wow.
pounds in 2 weeks. You could count his ribs, but he had this great big distended belly. It was horrible. So the more and more that we're starting to find out, because, there's a saying in FDN, no matter how common a symptom may be, it is never normal. And we're seeing upticks in these occurrences of transgendered folks, and there's nothing wrong with them. I'm not saying that's an issue, but I'm saying it's not necessarily normal, especially with the amount that we're getting these days. So we need to look a little deeper. Is there something that could be
Sure.
causing this, right?
Yeah.
And the heavy metals and the toxins, especially if they're clogging up the hormone receptors and insulin receptors and all these other things, like, it kind of makes sense that it's screwing with a person's chemistry. If they're not
Totally.
getting the right signals, like, that just, it's kind of
Yeah.
common sense.
Well,
Yeah.
I actually just listened to a podcast with Jay Campbell on this, and he talks about the estrogen and testosterone, how it's supposed to basically, like, the gender comes in when they're in the womb, and there has to be a really strong signal from either of these hormones. And so when the signal of the hormone is not very strong, so whether it's estrogen or testosterone, then there's that kind of confusion that comes in. And then, obviously you have the chemical toxic load, and even just like our society with some of the toxic language that we have and the confusion around, we want to accept everyone. And like I said, it's not about, there's nothing wrong, but I also look at, hey, I think your brain is inflamed. I think there's like detoxification pathways. And if you still want to, you can be your own person, but can we get the brain inflammation down? Can we make sure that you're actually happy in your body? Because I don't know anybody who is happy when they're confused and trying to figure out who they are supposed to be in this world, Thank you for
Oh,
sharing that. That's a lot.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've
So
played all that, and I've just recently became a stand-up comedian, and I
get out of here.
had my first paid gig 2 weeks ago, and I totally killed it. And I brought up brain inflammation, and I brought up Lyme disease. And my next one I'm talking about my transgendered son, because, I'm trying to find a way, other than podcasts are great, but another way, another platform, right, to bring awareness and education to this, because, man, if the human
With some
population,
humor, in it, right? Like some lightness. Yeah.
heavy shit.
It is super heavy. Yeah. You know what? I've actually really enjoyed that. And I don't know if it's Joe Rogan that has popularized comedy so much, or it's just been on the uptake in general. But I love watching stand up. It's probably the only thing that I watch when I do have time, because I just want to be entertained, like I don't want to watch drama. I don't want to at the end of the day. And I have really enjoyed watching the stand-up comics have their little like personality and their beliefs and their values come through in their stand-up in such a lighthearted way. It's like they're having little monologues while they're making people laugh. I have so much respect for that.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, it takes a lot to be so vulnerable and put that out there. Like some of the stuff I talk about, I'm like, oh God. But
Yeah,
I
I'd
kill
love
it.
to see it. If you can send me, I'd love to
I
see it. I
have
love
I have
stand-up.
it. Yeah, I'll send you my bit.
I would love it. So, okay, tell us the healing journey then. How the medical system was a mess. How did you get to be, and then you had the revelation, okay, I need to focus on the foundation. How did you get to be where you are today?
So within a few months of doing, FDN, the model, making sure my detox pathways open, getting diet dialed in, sleeping, getting my stress level down, my whole life changed within 3 months. Like it was
Amazing.
it was fast. And then I hit a plateau. And that's when I started learning about mold. And I was living in mold at the time and had Marcons and that whole 9 yards. So that was a whole nother layer to peel back.
What's Marcons?
It's oh geez. It's like a super virus, I think, in the nose from mold. I had to use a silver spray to get rid of it, type of
Okay.
thing. Kind of like MRSA. It's
Yes.
a yeah, yeah. God, it's been so long since I talked about that. I was like, oh, what is it? So then went through that whole thing, and then the cavitations hit another plateau, and then had to have the cavitations fixed, and then hit another plateau. And that's when I had to really start looking at trauma in my nervous system because I kept relapsing. And I'm finding this language common in the Lyme and autoimmune world. They'll talk about their flares like it's a normal everyday occurrence and that it's normal. And it doesn't have to be. There's, a flare is just your body still telling you, hey, there's something going on in here. You need to dig deeper.
Yep.
And for me, it was the mental, emotional, the nervous system resetting. And there's so much talk about this now. Thank God, bringing it. It's not just a freaking neurotransmitter deficit. I hate that. Dr. Amen was at the biohacking conference, and he talks about how this is like psychologists are the only ones that don't actually get to look at the organ that they're working with, and they don't run labs on the organ that they're working with. And it's fascinating, and it really is a lot of brain inflammation. It's mold, it's heavy metals, it's other viruses and bacteria crossing the blood-brain barrier, causing a lot of inflammation, or the trauma getting stuck in your nervous system, right? So I told you, how I was brought up. So I was always on alert, right? There was always a tiger in the room, and you can't digest your food when you're like that. You don't have a sex drive when your nervous system is like that, and you can't heal and sustainably keep it when your nervous system is like that. So I remember reading the book, The Body Keeps Score. That was my
Yes.
first intro in. Holy shit, that book killed me. Like I'm ugly crying on the couch. My husband's like, what are you reading? I'm like, this little girl and her dad. He's like, no, I don't want to hear anymore. But it was the first time though somebody was, speaking that language. And so from there, I went and did like 2 weeks later, jumped in both feet with an ayahuasca journey.
Yep.
And then I've done psilocybin twice. I've done bufo twice. I've done a couple weeks of low dose ketamine. I've done somatic experiencing work. I've done breath work. I've done meditation, bioenergetic stuff, everything to get my nervous system calm, because nothing productive, awesome can happen except for running away from a tiger when you're amped up all the time. Even your God-gift manifestations, the energetic part of this world can't happen. Miracles can't happen when you're constantly in that fight or flight. And so I spend a lot of days. I'm shocked at how much time I spend in meditation these days. Like before, I used to it was just another thing to get off my to-do list because I'm a typical type A recovering
Totally.
personality,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And now I schedule it in, 10-minute slots 3 times throughout my day just to unplug, unwind, get back into my heart, remind myself why I'm here and why I'm doing what I'm doing, right?
Yep.
And man, how different my life has changed even in the last 3 months of really dialing in that practice. It's just been whew.
Yeah. Question. Psychedelics, that's something that I've dabbled in with myself and even genuinely been make recommendations for patients. Is that the first thing that you jumped into, or was there other things is that just your personality and you're like, I want to dive in and figure this out?
Well, I mean, once I started realizing what was going on, and then so my memories were gone from childhood. Like I didn't remember anything before the age of like 17. And that's
Yeah.
a red flag right there. I was
Yeah.
like, no,
Huge.
there's no trauma. And I had been gaslit by my parents too that there was no trauma. And so blah, blah, blah. It's just normal not to remember anything before the age of 17. Once I started asking the questions, I started getting little glimpses of shit. I was like, and that's when I remembered, like, oh my God, my uncle committed suicide. I was really, really close with him as a 4-year-old.
Yeah. So it
And
was a
I'm
big trauma for
raised
you.
with addicts, there's no way that they had the emotional IQ to help me deal with my grief. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like, so yeah, so I started putting two and two together, and I felt like a big hammer is what was called for in this case. A lot of people start off slower and more gentle, and absolutely that's a way you can do it. I ended up processing like 40 years of mother shit in one night and thought I was going to die and heard myself
That's a
cry.
theme in your healing journey.
I know, right? Thought I was going to
I
die.
thought I was going to die again.
Oh my God. Heard myself cry in a way I've never, like noises were coming from the depths of my soul that were just waiting to be let out. And it was so bizarre to hear myself make those noises. It's just the pain, the pain, the pain, the pain. And then there was the psilocybin journey after that. I swear to God, if you would have actually picked up all the Kleenexes that were around me and weighed them, they would have weighed 2 pounds worth of snot and tears, because that's all I did was cry for 4 hours. And so that seems to be a common theme when I do psychedelics, plant stuff, is tears, because I don't, in the past, have taken the time to allow myself to feel. And I was very detached from my feelings, and being a woman, and in a man's world, an entrepreneur, and trying to be taken seriously, right? You can't act like a woman. You can't have emotions. And so I had drowned out these parts of my life, and those are God-given gifts. Like emotions are something that we need to feel. God didn't give them to us they're not like junk DNA.
That's how you know you're human.
Right? And
Yeah.
here we spend so much time trying to freaking tamp those out and become robots. And so, yeah, so that was like a big lesson for me, is taking the time out to actually feel and slow down enough to, how do I feel about that? Right? Because anger was like the only thing that was ever allowed in my household. Anger was the only acceptable thing. So, everything always came out sideways. Anger, sadness, usually anger is a blanket on top of sadness. So once you
Totally. Yeah.
remove that anger, right, and then I'd feel the sadness, because sadness was not allowed in my house. You get torn apart like a pack of wolves if you showed that kind of weakness, right? So yeah, so it's fascinating, the journey that I'm on now. But yeah, no, it is my personality to just kind of dive in both feet. That comes in the territory with Lyme folks too. Some of the controversial stuff I've tried in the past 10 years to get over Lyme, because there is no standard of care. There is no, cure. There is no, fill in the blank. I had to become an advocate. So you would tell me, oh, you want me to do MMS, which is, chlorine dioxide? Well, oh, you want me to put silver in my veins? Like, oh, you want me to put ozone up my ass? Like, I've done some really crazy stuff in the name of getting better. So why would my mental health journey be any different?
Yep. That's it. Well, and could you really, this is kind of I don't know if there is a scale, because I'll always draw this out for my patient. There's like the physical, mental, and emotional. And with fertility, there is it's almost like there's certain characteristics, right? Of people, just like with Lyme or chronic disease, you're going to have certain trauma. And I see that all the time in fertility as well. Like I can't tell you how many of my clients struggling with infertility also have trauma and alcohol abuse in the family, whether it's mom, dad, or both, or lost a parent when they were really young, or had a really traumatic relationship. It's just like a lot of that stuff is connected. How much of it do you think, through going through your own journey, was it like doing the physical stuff, doing the ozone and doing the, all the IV therapies and blah, 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 versus the mental and emotional? Is there like a percentage that you could put on it? Or was it just like the right time at the right thing at the right time?
That's a great question. And I, being the functional practitioner that I am, I stopped putting so much emphasis on that, and I'm putting more emphasis on the other. So I think I put the cart before the horse, and it's why it took me a little bit longer, right? Because again, if you're
So you
stuck
stopped putting more emphasis on the physical stuff and you started putting more emphasis on the mental and emotional.
absolutely 110%, because the best supplements in the world, the best everything in the world aren't going to work as well if your body, if your nervous system is so trashed. So really taking that emphasis, which really sucks because so many people are still so brainwashed. Like I had a client that worked with me for over a year and got him so far, and he was just still at the end of the year, I'm having really bad anxiety. Is there a supplement you can give me for my ADD and my anxiety? And I was like, well, have you got out and grounded today? Did you get movement in today? Have you done your breath work today? Have you meditated or done your gratitude journal? Well, no, well, no, well, no, well, no. And then I'm like, no, I'm not giving you another supplement. Like that's no
Yeah,
different than the Western med model. I mean, you're taking a pill,
totally.
so, changing it out for a supplement, but it's no different. You're still not getting to the root cause. And until you learn how to slow down, my friend,
Yep.
right? Your anxiety is going to kill you because what is it you're not trying to feel, right? Your
Yep.
body's telling you something.
Yeah. Sometimes I'll use these supplements like to knock people out so they can start to feel,
Absolutely.
but like I'll do that as a trick. They're like, oh, I'm really tired, Dr. Jade. I'm like, good. Now what do you feel? Because it's just like, sometimes it feels like this uphill battle. Like we have so much stuff bombarding us all the time, from like the EMFs to the workload to even, if you already have kids and just family stuff, like just it's really demanding all the time. So if we can find that shut off button, and I think that's kind of what psychedelics do too, right? But it's a huge reset.
How huge. You have to in this world. No one's going to give you that time. You have to take it for yourself. No is a complete sentence and you
Yeah.
don't have to explain yourself, right?
Yeah.
Say no and shut up. Like you don't have to explain. Like what a gift. So I talk about the gifts of Lyme disease on a regular basis. And a lot of people want to like shoot arrows at me because they're still kind of stuck in that victim mentality. But it taught me how to slow down and take care of myself. There's no way in hell I would have learned these lessons any other way
Yeah.
because I was just a typical go, 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 push, 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 grind, American culture attitude, eat on the
Yeah.
go, fast food. I smoked cigarettes, I drank, all the things that you see on TV that everybody else does. There's no way I would have learned it. I remember 10 years ago thinking, damn hippies, saying that everything will give you cancer. And now I'm the opposite. I'm like, oh my God, everything will give you cancer, right? It's the truth. So like the
They
old,
were right all along.
the old you would kick the new me's ass, but
Yeah, that's
but
it.
it's the truth. And so, getting that message out there and having people
Hmm.
giving them permission to slow down, to say
Yep.
no, put themselves first, because that's another reason I see women, especially they have a higher occurrence for autoimmune and Lyme disease. And part of it, I think, is because as women, we put everybody else before our needs. And when we get the scraps left over for so long, then our body finally is like, well, she doesn't care about us, then why should we?
Yep.
We got to start putting ourselves first and taking the time to slow down.
I had an appointment with Dr. Gabe Roberts. He was at the eco event. I just happened to meet him. He wrote a book, From Pain to Purpose, and he's a subconscious healer, but he asks questions and he's like, I need you to answer fast. Like you don't have time to think about it. And like, yes or no, do you say yes when you should say no? And it's always like, yep, all the time, and when I ask my patients, it's like, yep. So then it's like, okay, why do we do that? And then, you can trickle down to help you under, because it's usually just behaviors that's passed on from your mom. And then she got it from your grandma and she got it from, her mom and so on and so forth. So it takes a lot of energy to break that cycle.
Absolutely. And it's not
Yeah.
easy. Like I just did it twice this last week and both of them like lost their shit on me. Like it was kind of ugly, but it was kind of beautiful. It's like, oh, well, thank you for showing me your true colors. Like I can't even have a healthy boundary for myself without you completely losing it. Like, and one ghosted me and one like got nasty with me. And I was just kind of like, God bless you, self-editing universe. Like, bye-bye.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But honestly, Heather, what I'm finding really inspiring, and I think that I always try to help my patients with this as well and be aware, it's not attaching yourself to a certain disease or a certain personality or and being okay with the change, because people are not going to be okay with the change, like literally what you explained. But it's a lot of the times we actually are afraid of not having Lyme disease anymore. And it sounds crazy, but if I'm not sick all the time, then
Come on.
nobody's paying attention to me. And for me, it was like in different aspects of my life. Like I was so involved in CrossFit at one point. It was like, it has to be CrossFit all this, even though my body was starting to break down. It's like, no, no,
Mm.
no, this is the way. And when I was able to step away from that and be like, maybe it's not like I can do certain parts of it, but I don't have to compete anymore. Oh, okay. And I feel people just get stuck in those personas, if you will, and they cannot they cannot separate.
That's why I love all my clients' prerequisite is reading Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself by Dr. Joe Dispenza, because right there it says that you cannot change your personal reality without changing your personality. Like that's my favorite quote of his. And it's the truth, because how many times I start working with people, when can I go back to eating? When can I go back to doing? And my head explodes. It's like, oh, God bless you. No, you can't go back to that, because then you'll go back to the mechanism that helped get you sick. Like you need to see the correlation. If you want something different, you got to do something different. What is that? The definition of insanity, right? Doing the same thing over and over
Yep.
again, expecting a different result. So really hitting that message home. And for some reason, I didn't feel like they could hear it from me. So that's why I was awesome when I found that book, because now it's coming from a male voice and it's coming from somebody else. And sometimes they need to hear things a few times from a few
For sure. Yeah.
different perspectives, right, to
Yeah.
hear it. So yeah, it's now, I never used to have like prerequisite reading. And then now it's like, nope, before we even start working together, you got to read this. So
Yeah. So when did you actually get your certification? Because we talked about your healing journey, but when did you decide that you were going to help people like this?
2013.
Okay. And that was just through your own journey.
Yep. Yeah, I was a hairstylist at the time. My body was falling apart. I was never really passionate about it. I was good, but I wasn't passionate about it. Always was fascinated by alternative and natural medicine. Used to play around with herbs, back in the day. After my first psych ward, I was starting to look up like natural remedies for anxiety and depression. And I was taking these awesome herbs, but then I was also eating McDonald's and drinking and smoking cigarettes and not sleeping at night, so it was, I had
Yeah.
just a little piece of the puzzle. So yeah, I started back in 2013, I was in practice for about 6 months and then went through a divorce and kind of blew up my life and went through another little journey for about 7 years. And then I came back full time in 2020.
That's incredible. I'm just so inspired by your life. You've blown it up by so many times. And tell me, is that just like, is there a drive? Like there's something internally that would tell you and you're like, I'm just going to do this and I'm going to go just to like, how does somebody come from so much trauma and so much disease and so much illness to now being where you are?
Got me all choked up. That's a really good question. I don't know. I just have this really crazy ass spirit that just doesn't fucking give up. And this insatiable need for answers and the truth and to dig deeper. People, if you're going to go into the woo woo, like numerology, I'm a number 7. There's a lot of different things that I've looked into that all have said you came here with a very difficult life path, and for you to overcome these things and then to educate and inspire. So it's the hero's journey or the dark night of the soul just seems to be kind of written in my DNA. And as soon as I figured that out, and that was like just within this last year, and learning to accept it, of this just is my path. And then that's when I got into comedy, right? And I'm like, fine, well, this is my path and I'm going to make fun of it and I'm going to inspire it and educate and bring some
Hmm.
levity to it. I stopped fighting it and stopped feeling sorry for myself, because sometimes if you don't know why things are happening and you're just like, oh, why me, type of thing, it could be kind of easy human thing to do. But then when I just realized that for some reason, that is just what I'm here to do this time around, then I just accepted it. And, it is what it is. And I'm learning from it, what I'm supposed to learn from it, and inspire and educate in the way that I can, be a beacon for others.
Yeah. I think it's so inspiring. Like I'm in awe listening to like just your story and your journey. It's not what I expected at all, which is,
I get that a lot.
yeah, but it's, I think I deal with a lot of darkness with my patients as well. And there's a lot of comparison and there's a lot of, well, this person got pregnant and they didn't have to do anything. And why do I have to? And I mean, essentially that's the victim speaking. And then sometimes I feel like we get trapped in, even though I don't speak like the victim, my actions
Mm,
are, I'm doing the actions, but I don't actually believe that it's
yeah.
going to work. And I think that belief is rooted in the mental, emotional, like your early psychology, essentially, when you were brought up.
Oh, absolutely. And I was told I was an idiot and I would never amount to anything. And, the amount of abuse, they say up until 7, kids are just a sponge. And that was like probably the sickest time in my family's history.
Totally.
I didn't get the tools for compassion. I didn't get the tools for unconditional love. And it's been quite fascinating to, as an adult, trying to put in things that other people got naturally from their parents. My God My second husband, he's just incredible. And he's just been such a, what's the word I'm looking for? An example of how to live unconditional love and how all this stuff works. Because even at my worst, he never treats me bad. Because, not even a couple of years ago, I was still having some issues and, talking about taking myself out and, issues of rage. And he never made me wrong for any of it. He always just held me in love. And I've, never experienced that before. So it's awesome to have somebody in your life who can, show that example, or are turning to higher ascended masters like Jesus, Buddha, all these other people who showed and taught love. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. And you probably like, the thing is, it's like, you're also not ready for it. You weren't ready for it. I don't know how long you've been married with your current husband now, but like, you probably weren't ready for it 15 years ago.
Oh God, no, absolutely not. I wouldn't have been ready back when I had my first business. I wouldn't have been ready for success back then. Like, absolutely not. Like, we all divine timing, right? Like, I had to go through everything I had to go through. And I think patience was the thing that I lacked the least of. It's like, why isn't it happening yet? When it comes to anything. So I get it. But no, it's divine timing, and things happen when they're supposed to. As cliche as that sounds, it's the truth.
Yeah. Yeah. When I struggled to find my partner, I remember it was like using my counselor and my naturopath who said, it's not about attracting the right person. It's about becoming the right person. Yep. And it was like, oh, I'm attracting the wrong person. It's like me is the person, like I am attracting the right person. And when actually that clicked, I started to look at relationships very, very different, because then it's when someone comes into my life, whether it's my husband at that time, but even like friends or acquaintances, business partnerships, whatever, you're like, why is this person in my life? And not in like a why, but a curious, like, is this a forever person, or is this a for now person, for a reason, for a season? What is it? So.
Yeah, absolutely. 110%. I remember crying after my divorce, after being on a couple dates, to my mom, and it was just like, why do I keep attracting these emotionally unavailable men? And then I was just like, oh, it's because I'm emotionally unavailable. It's like light bulb, and then that's what started me off on that whole, I did the passion and intimacy coaching for a couple of years, like trying to dive deeper into the feminine and masculine and emotions and all that stuff, because every part of my life is broken, from relationships to health to money to everything. And so I just have that natural curiosity that when something isn't working, I dig deep and try to fix it.
Yeah, let's piece it together. So, I mean, tell us about how, your clients and kind of the program you're offering. A program, how do you work with people? What does that look like? How much of physical, mental, emotional, is there a pathway that like you incorporate? Everyone has to do this before they do this. I'd be just curious to know.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So the course that I put together, it's called the Foundations of Health, and it is everything I did from a structurally foundational, mental, emotional, detoxing aspect to getting better. Yeah, and I even have like a 6-7 video cooking series, right? Real cooking for real life. Because if you're having all these awesome supplements and you're doing the somatic work, but you're trashing your gut with McDonald's, right? So they all have to work together. You got to dial in your sleep. You got to dial in the right kind of exercise. And so I cover all that stuff in this course. And right now I've got it on sale. I think your folks with the code Dr. Jane gets $307 off the course. So make sure to check that out. And then I also have a freebie on the website. So the LymeBoss.com, that's LYME, like Lyme disease. We're not making margaritas. How many times people still put in Lyme, LIME? And I'm like, oh, that's cute. No, we're not making margaritas. But there's a free cooking cookbook that I have for a giveaway, so they can get started with, because that seems to be a lot of people's hang up too. We've just gotten out of the culture of cooking, and people are like, you want me to do what in the kitchen? So it's like, here, let me show you.
Yeah. It's a big piece. So it's like missing the nurturing. And do you find that, because it can be pretty overwhelming it's diet, it's exercise, it's sleep, it's hydration, mental, emotional health. Do you have a priority list, or do you find that it's like just really dependent on each individual and what's going on for them?
So the FDM way is the dress for success model, which is diet, rest, exercise, stress reduction, and supplementation. And that's kind of the order that I start to work with people. And I weave in the nervous system stuff within each of those modules. And you notice that supplementation is at the end, right? Because you can't
supplement your diet.
You can't supplement your way out of, not exercising. You can't supplement your way out of bad sleep. So many folks, especially, it's sad. There's still a lot of functional practitioners that kind of practice that model of like a doctor, where it's just, here's this handful of supplements, but they're not asking you about if you're pooping or what your stress level's like, or, what your
Yeah.
diet's like. So if you run into those type of practitioners, run, because you're just going to make a lot of expensive pee.
Yep. Yeah. And I think, I mean, I used to practice like that as well because I didn't know any better. But what made me change is because I wasn't getting any results with people or
Yep.
myself. Like I was getting frustrated. And so you definitely want to look for those practitioners who are living proof of they've had an experience. This is what they're doing and they're changing, they're being transparent. But I've had a patient recently where she shares, like, I ran all these lab work results and I can't remember, I think it's a GI Diagnostics lab. And it's literally like your glutathione is off. So you need to take NAC or like this glutathione. Your vitamin C is low. So you need to take vitamin C. Your B vitamins are low. And she's like, and here's the prescription. And I'm like, if that was medicine, then we would all be out of a job. Like, if it was just, here's what you need to do. And, so there's an interpretation piece to talking to a human and having health assessment and really asking the deeper questions of like, well, why are the B vitamins low? Why is your glutathione out of range? And, providing appropriate steps.
Absolutely. 110%.
Yeah. Anything else that you would like to? So we have a course and we have a cookbook that people will link that down below and they can check that out. And really that's for anyone who's struggling with Lyme, autoimmune disease, mold toxicity. Did I get that right?
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah. Anything else that that we haven't talked about that's important to know for any of these conditions?
Just not to give up, so how
Mm.
many people, they've already seen 20 practitioners, and what are you going to do differently for me? Great. You found out 20 different things that don't work, right? So it's just process elimination. Awesome. Keep going, because you never know if that next 21 person is going to be like that doctor for me with the twinkle in her eye, and within 5 minutes, can give you answers. So don't give up. Keep looking.
Yeah. I think that's such a good reminder for everything. My clients ask me that all the time. Like, when do I give up on this journey? And I'm just like, never. What are you talking about? You can take breaks though. Like if you feel overwhelmed and you feel tired, you can take a break. But giving up is like, what are you giving up on?
Right.
Yeah.
What's your other choices? Just to roll over and just let yourself die? Like, no, you got one life. Let's live it.
Yeah. Yeah. You're such an inspiration. Thanks so much for being here. I'm in awe of what you've gone through and like how you've attacked your healing journey. And like, I think attacked is the right word because you haven't given up, but you've also just head on, like, I'm going to do this. I'm going to figure this out. And it's really inspiring, Heather.
Awesome. Thank you so much.